Our tale kicks off in a world flipped upside down by the dawn of awakeners, deep within a god-forsaken, icy wasteland where the planet's strongest had assembled. All eyes were on the legendary Death Den, a top-tier S-rank hellhole that served as a cozy little home for some ancient, unspeakable horror. This particular dungeon, being the very first to pop up on planet Azure, had a perfect winning streak for decades. Its welcome mat was literally paved with the bones of countless so-called masters who went in and never came out. But today, the script was getting a major rewrite. Some absolute madman named Su Ming decided to solo the Death Den, and after a throwdown of epic proportions, the legend himself walked out, having just sent the dungeon's god-tier boss packing. But waiting for him at the finish line, completely gassed, wasn't a cheering crowd with confetti. Nope, he got a surprise party thrown by the very guys he used to call his buddies. They had him completely boxed in, and they weren't here to offer him a drink. One of them sneered, telling Su Ming to quit struggling and just fork over the shiny new divine artifact. Another one chimed in, basically announcing that his goose was cooked, sarcastically calling him the hero of humanity, and promising a painless exit if he'd just be a good boy and give up. Su Ming, with what little energy he had left crackling around him like static, finally put two and two together. These vultures had just waited for him to do all the dirty work so they could swoop in and yoink the prize. He had to wonder, was this their grand scheme from the very start? Out from the pack of backstabbers, a pretty boy with blonde hair named Jing Tang strutted forward, whipping out a sword that hummed with crackling blue lightning. He put on his best serious face to confront the man he once called a friend. He demanded the divine artifact, then had the nerve to play the friendship card, offering to let Su Ming live if he handed it over. With a smug grin, Zhang Tong bragged that he could just snuff out whatever pathetic dregs of power Su Ming had left anyway. Gripping his own sword, which burned like a crimson inferno, Su Ming cursed himself for being so damn blind. He'd treated these clowns like family since they were kids, practically his sworn brothers. They'd fought side by side for years, and he'd never once sniffed out the snakes they truly were. Drowning in the bitter taste of betrayal, he decided that if he was going down, he was going down loud. He lifted his weapon, and the divine artifact erupted in a cataclysmic blast of red and purple energy, triggering a massive explosion. And there he stood, a defiant smirk on his face. Su Ming laid down the challenge to his ex-buddies. You want this Ring of Dao Defiance? Come and get it. But let's be real, I highly doubt any of you chumps have what it takes. That overwhelming surge of power left his so-called allies completely shell-shocked. One of Zhang Tong's goons started getting antsy, screaming for the group to just finish, suing off already, but a guy named Zhang Mong told them to cool their jets, cautioning our boy Su Ming not to go full-on berserker with that shiny new toy. Just when the tension was thick enough to cut with a sword, a new challenger drops in from the sky, yelling out Su Ming's name. He glances up, probably thinking, oh great, who now? Only to see a pink-haired girl named Xiao Man making a beeline for him, and she immediately goes for the world's most dramatic, over-the-top hug. She starts spinning this sob story about hearing some nasty rumors and just had times to rush over because she was so worried. Su Ming, bless his naive heart, tries to calm her down, telling her, don't worry babe, everything's cool. These chumps are totally out of my league. But even our dense protagonist has a single brain cell firing, wondering how the heck these goons found him with such pinpoint accuracy. And as he's connecting the dots, the main baddie, Zhang Tong, flashes a smirk that just screams, I'm a genius villain. That's when Su Ming feels a little something extra in his back. Oh wait, that's a knife. Courtesy of his dear Xiao Man, she then whispers the classic betrayal line, oops, I'm the one who snitched on you. And Su Ming's face is pure, unadulterated shock. He just stares, dumbfounded, as a wicked red magic circle lights up on her hand, the one still holding the pointy end of their relationship. His brain is literally short-circuiting, trying to figure out why his supposed ally would pull a stunt like this. Meanwhile, across the field, Zhang Tong is having the time of his life, yelling that the final piece of his evil puzzle has just clicked into place. With a flair for the dramatic, he orders the activation of their super special protagonist be gone imprisonment formation. And boom, a giant, angry-looking red sigil materializes in the sky right over Su Ming's head, trapping him like a fly in a web. To make matters worse, glowing red chains shoot out from the stab wound, wrapping around his body and basically putting a giant off switch on his powers. He recognizes the curse mark, it's Xiao Man's signature move. The horrifying realization dawns on him. This betrayal wasn't a spur-of-the-moment thing. Jiang Tong strolls over to the other girl, Xian, and casually drapes an arm around her like he just won the lottery. He then starts his villainous monologue, explaining how this little prison was custom-made just for him, specifically designed to stop him from using any of his awesome main character powers. Xian then chimes in with a cold, cruel smirk, clarifying that she was always times Jiang Tong's girl. She lays it on thick, telling Su Ming he was just a disposable tool, only useful because of his ridiculously rare 9-star talent. Turns out, they just needed him to play fetch and grab the divine artifact for them. Broken and betrayed, Su Ming hits his knees, letting out a scream of pure rage and heartbreak. Now, he's just a sitting duck, all tied up and powerless. Seeing his chance, Zhang Tang orders his lackeys to finish the job and grab the loot. The goon squad charges in, weapons glowing and ready for the final blow. But just as they're about to turn our hero into protagonist paste, the ground decides to have a party and explodes. A massive, bony hand shoots out from below, and it's not alone. A whole army of skeletons pops up, blocking the attackers like a bony barricade, forming a protective circle around Su Ming. Our boy is just staring, completely baffled, wondering which necromancer just subscribed to his fan club. Just when you thought our boy was toast, a wild waifu appears, rocking some slick light purple hair and a classic mysterious hooded cloak. Su Ming's brain finally booted up and recognized her. Ji Yao, the resident bone raiser. She dropped in between him and the gaggle of goons like a raid boss. She was flexing a seriously OP-looking staff and basically told him, "Dude, don't you dare rage quit on me now." Her whole vibe screamed, "You shall not pass. Foss." With that loot. Naturally, the main baddie, Jiang Tong, just laughed like she was a level 1 mob. He basically called her another player lining up to feed his kill count. He started his villain monologue, bragging that with his squad of dozens of masters, not even the server admin could bail Su Ming out this time. His crew of NPCs immediately started brawling with Ji's skeleton party, and seeing his minions get clapped, Jiang Tong threw a massive tantrum. He went full Leroy Jenkins, charging straight for Ji Yao while screaming that anyone in his path was getting a one-way ticket to the respawn screen. Then, one of Jiang Tong's lackeys shouted, "Hey, watch your six," like he was trying to be helpful. Psych. It was the oldest trick in the book. A total bait and switch. She fell for it, turning around with a surprised Pikachu face just as Jiang Tong zoomed in, swinging his sparkly, lightning-enchanted pointy stick at her. He even had the audacity to say, "No hard feelings, classmate," like he didn't just pull a super scummy move. Meanwhile, Su Ming was still stuck in a crowd control spell. All he could do was watch the horror show and spam her name in chat as the hit landed with a big, flashy critical. With the support mage down, Jiang Tong saw his opening for the final boss takedown. He strolled over to Su Ming and was like, "Stop worrying about your girlfriend's HP, bro. It's your turn to get deleted." And bam. He shoved his glowy blue butter knife right into Su Ming's chest, then leaned in for some classic villain whispering. The guy offered a final, terrible dialogue option: drop the legendary loot, and he might not send him to his last save point. But our boy Su Ming wasn't about to let this scrub have the last laugh, gripping those magical bindy things with a vengeance. Spewing HP potion, blood from his mouth, he gave his former teammates a look that could melt steel beams. He called them a bunch of griefing tryhards as this insane red and black "I'm about to go Super Saiyan" aura started flaring up around him. In a classic "if I'm going down, I'm taking you with me" move, Su Ming decided to pop his ultimate self-destruct skill. He even screamed its edgy name for all to hear: God-tier technique, Annihilation Burst. A massive, screen-shaking explosion went off, forcing Jiang Tong and Ren Xiaoman to panic dash out of the blast radius. When the dust settled, the server went quiet. There was Su Ming, looking like he'd just tanked a nuke. With his health bar in the single digits, he reached out, whispering Ji Yao's name like the final scene of a sad movie. He did the dramatic hero crawl over to her, holding her busted-up character model, absolutely filled with post-game regret. He was all like, "Why did you even bother grouping with me? I'm such a noob and I've wiped the party so many times." But Ji Yao just gave him this chill, peaceful smile. She reached up to boop his face and said something cheesy like, "Well, if this is a total party wipe, at least we can get sent back to the city hub together." As his life force was logging off, Su Ming got a sudden lag spike of strength. His legendary sword just poofed into existence and dramatically stabbed the ground right in front of him, probably unlocking a new cutscene. He wasn't just dying, he was making a final badass vow to his backstabbers. Clutching Guy's body tight, Su Ming, the legendary godslayer, spat out a curse-like promise. He roared that if he ever got a do-over, he'd personally hunt down Ren Xiaoman and Zhang Tang and turn them into human confetti. His so-called friends just stared from afar, their tiny brains struggling to compute. And then, the single light bulb in Zhang Tang's head finally flickered on. He figured out Su Ming's insane, "If I can't have it, no one can master" plan. The mad lad was actually planning to yeet the divine artifact into the afterlife with him, dragging it straight down into the void, just to spite them. Talk about petty. With his epic final words echoing, Su Ming basically told them, "You want this shiny thing? Then come and get it from my cold, dead hands." And with that, he took a swan dive off the cliff, holding Ji Yao tight, plummeting straight into the swirling vortex of pure chaos below. But in his hand, the Ring of Dao Defiance erupted in a golden flashbang of holy light. Everything just went white. Su Ming's hand fell limp, the classic sign of game over. But wait, plot twist. His consciousness rebooted, and he wasn't in some gloomy abyss, but staring up at a painfully blue sky and a school building that gave him some serious déjà vu. Totally bamboozled, his brain short-circuited even more when a voice crackled over a loudspeaker. Some announcer was droning on about the results of the 127th awakening ceremony at Xuanjing First Academy. Apparently, a student named Wang Chang had just successfully awakened, and his big new class was Enchanter. You know, the glorified crafting class. Not exactly a world shaker. Meanwhile, Su Ming, now back in his awkward teenage body, was just standing there in a sea of pimply-faced high schoolers. He caught some kids whispering about how the school's luck was in the toilet this year, but those two words, awakening ceremony, hit him like a truck. It all clicked into place with the force of a mental atom bomb. Holy crap, he'd actually time-traveled. He was 18 years old again, stuck on the exact day of his own awakening. What are the odds? As Su Ming stood there, trying not to have a full-blown existential crisis, the memories of this exact day came flooding back in glorious high definition. He spotted Wang Qiang, or, as he was affectionately known back then, Fatty. He remembered Fatty Wang becoming an enchanter in his past life too. Yep, definitely not a dream. This was real. Alright, time for a little memory test. He focused on the next kids in the queue. Let's see. Li Songyang was about to become a mediocre 2-star warrior. Chen Yu's awakening was going to be a total bust, and Song Li would luck out and become a battle mage. And boom, just like clockwork, Li Songyang started celebrating like he'd just won the lottery after awakening as a warrior. Right on schedule, Qian Yu stepped up, completely bombed his awakening, and proceeded to have a full-blown meltdown. He was followed by Song Li, who lucked out and snagged the battle mage class, just like the first time around. With every single event playing out like a perfect rerun, any lingering doubt Su Ming had was instantly yeeted out the window. A wicked little smirk crept onto his face as it finally sank in. This was round 2, baby. That smirk vanished in a flash, replaced by pure, unadulterated rage as the memory of those two-faced snakes, Yung Tong and Ren Xiaoman, twisted his gut. He knew this second chance was a gift from the heavens, a golden ticket to rewrite his pathetic past and serve up some ice-cold revenge. His vengeful daydreaming was cut short by a collective gasp from the peanut gallery. Up on stage, a pint-sized version of his future arch-nemesis, Zhang Tong, was having his big moment. He was, of course, surrounded by a ridiculously over-the-top purple aura. The announcer, practically losing his mind with excitement, shrieked that Zhang Tong had awakened a rare hidden combat class, Demon Puppet Warrior. And get this, with a monstrous 8-star innate attribute. The students below absolutely lost it. All the bootlickers started whispering that, of course, the golden boy of the prestigious Zhang family would get something so OP. Hearing this, Su Ming just stared down his future punching bag with cold, burning hatred, while the announcer continued to slobber all over the school's new genius. In the middle of his death glare contest, Su Ming felt a tap on his shoulder. He whipped around and his heart nearly stopped. It was a young, perfectly healthy Gi Yao rocking her school uniform. "There you are," she said. "I was looking for you." Seeing his shell-shocked face, she asked, "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Overwhelmed by a tidal wave of emotion, he quickly pulled himself together and blurted out, "Nah. I just wanted to congratulate you in advance." Gi Yao just looked at him, completely baffled. "Congratulate me for what?" she asked, and for a split second, the horrific image of her dying in his arms flashed through his mind. He forced the nightmare down, a genuine, gentle smile finally breaking through the gloom. "Oh, it's nothing," he said cryptically. "You'll figure it out soon enough." His voice was thick with sincere relief. "Man, it's just really good to see you again," he added, and right on cue, the announcer bellowed, "Next up, Gi Yao." Startled, she gave him one last confused look and hurried to the stage. She cautiously placed her hand on the great celestial stele. The massive, ancient artifact immediately crackled to life with blue energy the second her fingers made contact. A colossal surge of raw power erupted from the stone, completely engulfing her in a brilliant light show. The announcer's voice cracked with disbelief as he screamed that Gi Yao had awakened a hidden combat class, Necromancer, with a powerful 7-star attribute. The rest of the students were left completely speechless. The crowd was absolutely losing its mind. Meanwhile, Su Ming just watched with a smug smirk that screamed, "Just as planned," he thought to himself. Everything's going according to the script. And now, it's time for the main character's grand entrance. The announcer finally bellowed out Su Ming's name. As he sauntered towards the stage, his buddy Ji gave him a hopeful good luck. The rest of the peanut gallery? Not so much. They were all whispering, "No way, a third hidden class pops up. Especially not for some broke orphan like Su Ming." Alright, hold up. Let's hit pause for a quick world-building info dump. We're on planet Azure, in the Dragon Nation, a world run by superpowered folks called the Awakened. This whole gig started decades ago, when the Great Awakening went down. Ever since that fateful day, every person who hits the grand old age of 18 gets to play the power lottery in a ceremony to become one of these Awakened. These special individuals basically rewrote the rules of reality, flexing their powers and raking in cash like it was going out of style. But, of course, this kind of power doesn't come for free. There's always a catch. The glorious life of an Awakened involves a never-ending grind against gnarly beasts and diving headfirst into terrifying dungeons filled with monsters. As he strutted towards the celestial stone of destiny, Su Ming's mind drifted back to his first go-around. He recalled being an orphan, scraping by on stipends and scholarships. Then came the day of his first awakening ceremony, when the universe apparently decided to bless him with the ultimate cheat codes. An absolutely magnificent light show had descended from the heavens, and bam, he awakened a stupidly rare 9-star attribute and the legendary Godslayer class. Now, standing on this stage in his second life, he was dead set on flipping the script. He reached his hand out, hovering it over the awakening artifact, vowing silently, "Today, you're all gonna learn to put some respect on my name." The second he made contact, a colossal wave of purple and pink energy erupted from the stone, creating a light show in the sky that put everyone else's to shame. The announcer's jaw just about hit the floor. He was sputtering, wondering if they were witnessing the birth of a 9-star genius, or maybe something even more broken. G and the rest of the students were completely and utterly gobsmacked. Su Ming braced himself, ready to feel that familiar, epic surge of power from his original awakening. But hold on. This time, something was different. Way different. A glowing blue sigil blazed to life on his chest, and from it, the very divine artifact he had died with, the Ring of Dao Defiance, materialized out of thin air. He was completely floored. The realization hit him like a truck. The ring had actually time-traveled with him. But before his brain could even process this insane development, another completely unexpected event went down. A bizarre sensation started coursing through his entire body. When bam, a holographic screen popped into existence right in front of him. A system notification chimed in, announcing that the Ultimate God Slayer class system was successfully locking onto its new host. It followed up by declaring his awakening a massive success and that he'd been gifted a shiny new class. But hold on. This wasn't the class he remembered from his past life. He'd been handed something way better, a mythic tier class called the Sword God. Su Ming's jaw just about hit the floor in sheer disbelief. A mythic class? Was that even a thing? And that ridiculously epic title he'd just been saddled with? Meanwhile, the insane crimson energy exploding from Su Ming's awakening had zapped the entire stadium into silence, especially the announcer. The guy was completely flabbergasted, wondering what kind of freakish class could cause such a spectacle. Down in the crowd, the student body was buzzing with theories. One worried soul fretted that if it was a non-combat class, our boy Su Ming would be totally screwed. But Yung Tang immediately shot that idea down, arguing that with a light show that epic, there was no way it was some lame lifestyle class. And yet, as he stared, beads of sweat started trickling down his face, pinned in place by the suffocating pressure of Su Ming's aura. It was so intense, he was practically frozen. And Su Ming? He was just chilling in the middle of this energy hurricane, calmly scrolling through the deets on the golden panel floating in front of him. Yep, it was confirmed. His new class was Sword God, a total departure from the God Slayer he had last time around. He tapped the system interface, which ran a quick ID scan, confirming he was, in fact, Su Ming. And then, it pulled up his brand new status window. Class, Sword God. But wait, there's more. He also had a golden tier talent. It was called Universal Ascension, which basically gave him the power to level up or evolve literally anything. Su Ming was, once again, absolutely gobsmacked. He knew a golden talent was a whole tier above the legendary 9-star class he'd awakened in his previous life. A smug grin crept onto his face as it dawned on him. This new power should blow that old god-tier class out of the water. Giddy with excitement, he eagerly swiped open his skill interface to check out his new toys. And just like that, his hype train crashed and burned. The skill screen was completely blank, showing zero progress and a single, soul-crushing message. No abilities have been awakened. You could practically hear Su Ming's brain short-circuit with rage. He actually grabbed the holographic panel as if he could strangle it, screaming in his head about how in the world a golden freaking rank talent came with absolutely zero skills. But while Su Ming was having his meltdown, the crowd was getting antsy, wondering what the holdup was. Finally, the announcer's voice cut through the tension, asking if he was, done with his awakening yet. Su Ming was absolutely fuming, glaring at a skill interface as empty as his hopes after landing a supposedly god-tier class. It came with zero abilities, and he was seriously starting to think the entire system was just a top-level troll. Then, as if reading his salty thoughts, the panel blinked with a cheeky new message. It basically said, "Feedback received, you big baby. Resuming guidance now." A new prompt pointed him toward the Ring of Dao Defiance just chilling in midair, leaving him completely baffled. He gawked at the ring as it started to pulse with light, and the system smugly announced it had successfully identified the divine artifact. The very instant the ring got its official system stamp of approval, the system panel went supernova, and a ridiculously huge pillar of golden light exploded from where Su Ming was standing, blasting straight up into the heavens like some kind of cosmic signal flare. The resulting shockwave was so powerful, it nearly sent the announcer, who also happened to be the Academy's principal, flying. The old man had to brace himself for dear life as, high above the celestial monument, a gargantuan, rainbow-colored star popped into existence with a big fat number 10 glowing in its center. The principal's eyes practically bugged out of his skull as he sputtered in disbelief, recognizing the legendary symbol of a 10-star innate attribute. His voice, now 10 times louder with sheer shock, boomed through the microphone. He's awakened a 10-star hidden class. Swordmaster. The entire crowd absolutely lost its mind, screaming about the heaven-defying luck of a 10-star attribute. That was a level reserved for the nation's absolute monsters. Zhang Tong, meanwhile, just stood there, completely thunderstruck. Another student yelled that he thought Yung Tong's 8-star awakening was already insane, but this dude Su Ming just waltzed in and dropped a fully maxed-out 10-star attribute like it was pocket change. The principal, grinning from ear to ear like he'd just won the lottery, declared it a legendary year for the Academy. Not only did they have multiple hidden classes popping up, but now they had a bona fide Heaven's Chosen with a 10-star attribute. He admitted that, yeah, the Swordmaster class wasn't exactly S-tier, but with a 10-star innate talent to back it up, Su Ming's future potential was basically infinite. As a reward for this glorious moment, the principal announced he'd personally gift Su Ming a full set of cultivation-boosting goodies. However, not everyone was on the hype train. Murmurs of disappointment started rippling through the crowd. Some students flat-out called it a tragic waste of talent, explaining that the Swordmaster was a certified bottom-of-the-barrel class. They elaborated that it was the mediocre poster child for jack of all trades, master of absolutely nothing. You're forced to train in both ranged and close combat, splitting your focus between physical and magical attacks, making it the textbook definition of a fundamentally underpowered and garbage-tier class. The rest of the students erupted in laughter at his epic misfortune, absolutely roasting the cosmic joke of a 10-star talent getting stuck with such a trash-tier class. A couple of bleeding hearts tried to stick up for him, suggesting that with enough grinding, even a swordmaster could, maybe, possibly, become a decent damage dealer. And hey, with Su Ming's god-tier talent, he could definitely make it work, right? But the haters immediately shot them down, pointing out the class demands double the effort for half the payoff, and that he'd be lucky to even survive a slime in a beginner's dungeon. Up on the stage, Su Ming heard every single one of their condescending whispers. He tilted his head just so, his eyes hidden in shadow, thinking, so they all think my swordmaster class is a joke, do they? While the gossip mill kept churning, Guy ran up to Su Ming, a brilliant smile on her face. She cheered him on, and Su Ming, ever the gentleman, offered his own congrats. Guy Yao then told him to just ignore the peanut gallery because awakening a 10-star talent was absolutely insane. She admitted that, yeah, the swordmaster class was known for being a bit squishy in the early game, but she was totally convinced that with his level of talent, it would be a non-issue. Su Ming flashed her a warm smile, thanking her and promising that their trash talk wasn't getting to him at all. Then he added with a sly grin that them underestimating him was, in fact, the perfect scenario. A comment that left poor Zhao completely baffled. Their chat was cut short when the announcer called the next name, and the crowd went wild for Ren Xiaoman. The school's #1 idol sashayed forward, with Zhang Tong cheering her on from the sidelines like a dedicated fanboy. Guy couldn't help but comment on how popular she was, but Su Ming didn't say a word. In fact, instead of watching the show, Su Ming just turned around and started to leave. Guy called after him, totally confused, pointing out that the ceremony was still going. Su Ming's reply was ice cold, not even bothering to look back. I'm not interested. And as he walked off, a torrent of agonizing memories from his past life came crashing down on him. He remembered with crystal clarity how Ren Xiaoman had played him for a fool, only to betray and eliminate him without a second thought. He remembered the oath he swore with his dying breath, stealing his resolve to get payback in this second chance at life. A while later, Su Ming strolled through the city, noting how the world looked exactly the same as he remembered. But he knew, deep down, that the game board had been completely reset. Aside from his new class, he pulled up his system window and found a little surprise. A skill called Total Concealment. This legendary tier skill was an absolute game changer, letting him hide or straight up edit the info on his gear, his class, and all his other skills. The ultimate troll tool. Whoa, he recognized that. It was one of the 4 cheat code skills he'd brought back from his previous life. That lightning bolt of a realization sparked another memory, the glowing Ring of Dao Defiance. He stared down at his hands, completely floored. It finally clicked, the divine artifact had actually, for real, followed him back in time. As Su Ming was trying to wrap his head around this, the system panel flashed to life once more. A notification popped up, loading divine artifact. As the ring fully integrated with him, a brand new message appeared. Su Ming had inherited a portion of the skills from his old school gods class. He just stared, his mind completely blown. He was thinking, how in the world is it possible to get skills from my past life's class when my new one is the sword god? Then, a slick, detailed status screen materialized out of thin air, showing his name, Su Ming, level 1, with some perfectly balanced baby stats. His class was locked in as the mythic, world-unique sword god. And his talent? Oh, just something casually named Universal Ascension. The skills section was now loaded with 4 incredible abilities: Godslayer's Blade, Total Concealment, Shadow Step, and the Insightful Eye. With this fresh loadout of info, the gears in Su Ming's head began to turn. An old saying popped into his head: a guy might be innocent, but carrying a legendary item paints a huge target on his back. To avoid getting used like a tool by others, and since he was still a level 1 weakling, he knew he had to play it cool. While his 10-star talent was basically a giant glowing billboard, he decided he had to hide everything about his true, game-breaking mythic class, the Sword God. He promised himself he'd grab this second chance by the horns and not repeat his past blunders. He knew from his past life cheat sheet that the beginner dungeon challenge was set to drop on the second day after the awakening ceremony. With his insider knowledge and OP skills, Su Ming was beyond confident the beginner dungeon would be a total cakewalk. His mission was simple: level up faster than anyone else and snatch all the best loot. To pull that off, he decided to go straight for the dungeon's hardest boss right out of the gate. But first, he needed a decent weapon. Meanwhile, in a ridiculously swanky room atop a skyscraper named the Palace, a whole different kind of drama was kicking off. Zhang Tang and Ren Xiaoman were there together. Ren Xiaoman was teasing Zhang Tang about whisking her away to a place like this right after the ceremony, but he was fuming. He snapped at her to shut up about the ceremony, complaining that Su Ming had completely stolen his thunder. Ren Xiaoman, however, was already playing 4-dimensional chess. She told him not to be a sourpuss, explaining that even though Su Ming was just a swordmaster, his awakening attribute was off the charts. She promised that Su Ming would be a very useful pawn for them down the line. Hook, line, and sinker. Zhang Tang, completely intrigued, asked her to spill the beans. With a sly little smirk, Ren Xiaoman just flashed him her phone screen. Zhang Tong's face went from, "I'm so done with this," to, "Wait, what?" In a split second, Ren Xian laid out her master plan, her eyes gleaming with cold, calculating ambition. She was absolutely certain that if she dangled a juicy little carrot in front of Su Ming, he'd bite. Then, just like old times, they could wrap him around their little finger. And right on cue, according to her script, Su Ming rocked up to a ridiculously huge skyscraper. The kind that screamed, "I house a massive weapons market." He hopped in an elevator and shot up to the 12th floor, where some eager employee from the weapons emporium was waiting to greet him. As he strolled on in, he noticed the place was crawling with newbie awakened students, all buzzing about the upcoming novice dungeon trial. He couldn't help but overhear some of them whining about being broke, realizing they were doomed to grind in dungeons forever just for a half-decent weapon. Suddenly, Su Ming's attention was snagged by a crowd of fanboys gathered around one particular display. They were practically drooling over a glowing, blue sword dramatically named the Tyrant's Frostblade, a supposed diamond-rank weapon forged by some legendary high-level greatsword player. The mob of newbies was completely losing their minds over its so-called power, which could apparently freeze the blood in a monster's veins, but they were also crying internally at its price tag of 1 million advent coins. As they continued to gasp in awe, Su Ming just smirked. Oh, he remembered this thing from his past life, all right. This legendary weapon was a complete piece of junk, and the scam artist selling it was destined to get busted big time. His trip down memory lane was cut short by a voice. He turned to find some sharply dressed woman with short gray hair, flanked by two beefy-looking bodyguards. She cut right to the chase and asked if he was the one and only Su Ming, and he shot back, asking who wanted to know. The woman coolly introduced herself as Zhang Lan, the vice director of the Zhang Anan Group, no less, as she slid a business card his way. Su Ming snagged the card, giving her a look that said, "Don't think we've met." Zhang Lan completely ignored his brush-off and, loud enough for the whole floor to hear, announced that, on behalf of the Zhang Anan Group, she would be footing the bill for his entire shopping spree today. Then she dropped the other shoe, saying she hoped he could do her a little favor. When Su Ming asked what the catch was, she just nodded to one of her goons to show him a photo. The picture was of a young, smiling girl, though her eyes were mysteriously hidden, who was completely surrounded by a field of white flowers. Zhang Lan cut to the chase, introducing the girl as her younger sister, Zhang Yuning. Apparently, she was also a student at his school, and was a freshly minted, awakened. She then revealed she'd already done a background check on him, knowing all about his legendary 10-star talent. With that kind of power, she figured, the novice dungeon would be an absolute cakewalk for him. After reminding him that only noobs could enter, she finally laid out her proposition. She wanted him to play bodyguard for her sister, ensuring she could clear the trial without a single scratch. Su Ming paused for a beat, then hit her with a flat, "Not interested," and promptly turned to leave. Zhang Lan was completely stunned. She desperately yelled after his retreating back, offering him any weapon in the entire store if he'd just help. But all she got back was the sound of his footsteps. She seethed internally, wondering what gave some broke as a joke student who just got a lucky break the right to refuse her. But just as her temper was about to blow, Su Ming stopped in his tracks. With an impossibly calm face, he turned around and said, "Oh, is that so?" He then casually pointed at the most ridiculously expensive weapon in the shop, declaring he'd take the Tyrant's Frostblade. You know, the purely decorative sword with a price tag of 1 million advent coins. Zhang Lan saw red, instantly realizing he was deliberately trying to fleece her. She snapped at him for making things difficult, questioning if he really thought a nobody like him was worth 1 million coins. Su Ming simply reminded her that her exact words were any weapon. He told her that if she wasn't prepared to honor her own offer, then there was no deal. With a confident smirk, he decided to offer her a little free advice. He suggested she tell her dear sister to actually prepare with all her might, heavily implying that some things in this world can't just be bought with cash. To his surprise, Zhang Lan's anger melted away, replaced by a sly, intrigued grin. She found Su Ming fascinating, admitting to herself she'd been the one to overplay her hand. With that, she spun on her heel and departed with her bodyguards. The onlookers were speechless, whispering about how that kid had just played the powerful suits from the Zheng H group like a fiddle. As the commotion died down, Su Ming's phone buzzed. He pulled it out to see a message from none other than Ren Xiaoman. The text was word for word what he remembered. She asked if he'd liked her all this time, claimed she'd suddenly had a change of heart, and asked him to meet her on the roof of the academic building that night. A cold smile crept onto Su Ming's face. It seemed that even without awakening as the God-Slayer this time, Ren Xian, same old manipulative playbook. He hadn't forgotten his promise of a little payback. He shot back a curt message agreeing to her little meeting, and with that distraction handled, Su Ming got back to the real priority, gearing up. He sauntered over to a shop assistant and gestured towards a pile of jagged rocks that were optimistically labeled sword stones. The clerk explained they were basically geological loot boxes, with a slim chance of containing a silver rank weapon, but she warned him with big, cautious eyes that it was a total game of chance, and 99% of them were just filled with trash-tier daggers. Her jaw practically unhinged when Su Ming grinned and said, "That's exactly what I'm here for." He then launched into his master plan. Why waste a fortune on a fancy silver weapon that would be obsolete in a month? It was obviously a smarter move to gamble a pittance on a cheap rock that might just hold a jackpot. However, as his gaze swept over the stones, he chuckled internally. For him, there was no gamble involved. The hilarious truth was, he could literally read the item data inside the rocks. This little cheat code was a special souvenir he'd carried over from his past life, the one and only Eye of Insight. A system notification helpfully reminded him this legendary skill let his eyes perceive the true nature of all things. Armed with these built-in X-ray specs, he confidently snatched up a very specific stone from the pile. He knew a normal silver weapon off the rack would cost a ridiculous sum, hundreds or even thousands of advent coins. But using his personal cheat skill to snag one from the bargain bin, that was a 5-star steal for a broke student like him. As Su Ming settled down with his chosen weapon stone, his actions, of course, attracted the local peanut gallery. The one leading the charge was a kid with ridiculously blonde hair. He immediately recognized Su Ming as the absolute madman who had just told the powerful Jong-un group to take a hike. The blondie and his 2 lackeys swaggered over, sneering. "Well, if it isn't Mr. Big Shot, playing with a garbage rock," the bully mocked. He cackled at the sheer stupidity of it all, turning down a golden opportunity from a major league player, a total freebie, just to bet on a worthless piece of junk. "What an idiot," they jeered. Su Ming, however, was completely unfazed. He instantly placed the blonde bully, Yang Ding, just another rich brat from his past life who got his kicks from tormenting the freshman. This whole interruption was a drag, so Su Ming figured he might as well liven things up a bit. He calmly turned to Yang Ding and proposed a friendly little wager of, say, 5,000 advent coins, that he could pull a silver rank weapon from the very stone he was holding. After a moment of pure, dumbfounded silence, Yang Ding and his crew absolutely exploded with laughter. Yang Ding sneered, absolutely convinced Su Ming was a certified idiot. He jeered, saying there was a 99.9% chance the rock was absolute junk, and that he'd never seen someone so thrilled to literally set their money on fire. Su Ming just gave a lazy smile and said they'd see in a moment who was actually flushing their cash down the toilet. Yang Ding jumped at the bet, and a mob of curious onlookers quickly swarmed the area. Su Ming declared he was cracking it open right here, right now, warning the loudmouth not to even think about backing out. Yang Ding just howled with laughter, telling him to start thinking about the 5,000 coin debt he was about to rack up. With every eye in the place fixed on him, Su Ming coolly activated his Eye of Insight. His perception shifted, revealing the radiant crimson glow of a sword hiding within the worthless-looking stone. With a triumphant yell, he smashed the stone to bits. A blinding red light exploded from the shattered rock, and a menacing sword shot out. Yang Ding, his cronies, and the entire crowd could only stare, jaws agape, as Su Ming casually snatched the weapon from the air by its hilt. A system notification popped into view, identifying his new prize. It was a black iron crimson sword, a low-grade silver weapon boasting a special affix called Crimson Drinker, which let it feast on the blood of monsters to heal its wielder. Standing in the middle of the dumbfounded silence, Su Ming held his new blade, admiring what a fine piece of work it was. He then thought with a cold, calculating look that this new toy would be absolutely perfect for his little date with Ren Xian that night. Yang Ding and his lackeys were frozen solid, their minds completely blank. They couldn't believe Su Ming had just pulled a silver rank weapon out of a trash rock. Su Ming, testing the sword's weight, nonchalantly remarked that it wasn't half bad. He especially liked its lifesteal ability, noting it would save him the trouble of needing a heal bot in the upcoming dungeon trial. A system panel confirmed the stats. A silver rank black steel sword with a sweet plus 10% lifesteal. As Yang Ding's face twisted in panic, Su Ming aimed the sword's tip right at him, reminding the fool that a bet's a bet, and those 5,000 advent coins were now his. Utterly defeated, Yang Ding transferred the funds. Stomping off in a huff, he yelled back that he wouldn't forget this embarrassment. Su Ming simply offered a piece of parting advice. Maybe don't write checks, your skills can't cash next time. The shop assistant just stared, completely awestruck. He realized it had been years, literal years, since anyone had pulled a real weapon from one of their gambling stones. With his new winnings, Su Ming strolled back to the counter to snag a scabbard, casually asking if a measly 5,000 coins would do the trick. The flustered assistant practically stammered that, yes, it was more than enough. He ended up buying a flashy, gold-trimmed, silver-rank scabbard that cut weapon durability loss by a sweet 50%. Su Ming was pretty chuffed, knowing this would save him a fortune on repair bills down the line. The second he sheathed his sword, a familiar ding went off in his head as a system notification popped up. It dangled a juicy question. Did he want to activate the hidden function known as weapon manifestation? He decided to pass, thinking it wasn't the right time for the big reveal. With a smirk, he pocketed that little trump card. He figured he still needed to grind with this new toy and get its rank up first. Later, while cutting through a park, Su Ming took a moment to review his current build. He had to laugh. After awakening as the literal sword god, he didn't have a single usable class skill to his name. But his class did come with one ridiculously broken primal talent that made up for it: Universal Ascension. This unique little cheat code let him upgrade the quality of any item exactly one time. This was the perk that made his mythic class title more than just a fancy name. Gripping his sword, he decided to give it a whirl. He put his power to the test, and a system notification promptly appeared. Universal Ascension was activated. The process was a success, and the Crimson Drinker effect was officially obtained. The sword immediately began to pulse with a menacing, powerful red aura. A final pop-up displayed the weapon's new stats: a crimson black steel sword, now at a high silver rank. Its Crimson Drinker ability was now jacked up to siphon a target's lifeblood on contact. On top of that, it gained a brand new skill: Bloodthirst. This little beauty gave him a temporary +5 boost to all stats for 30 seconds after he sent a monster to the great beyond. Su Ming was more than pleased with the upgrade. With all his preparations finally complete, he activated the hidden weapon manifestation, totally confident that the beginner dungeon tomorrow would be an absolute cakewalk. Later that night, Su Ming made his way to the rooftop of the academic building for his appointment. He stood like a main character, silhouetted against the glowing, futuristic cityscape. His badass new sword was in hand, and right on cue, Ren Xian was already there. She turned with a seductive smile and greeted him, playfully teasing him for being fashionably late. That smile vanished in an instant, because without a single word, Su Ming swung his sword straight at her. She screamed, barely dodging the attack as the blade crunched into the concrete ledge right where her head had been. She stared at him, completely stunned, and managed to ask what on earth he was doing. With a cold, unblinking stare, Su Ming simply told her he was there to collect a debt. A gut-wrenching scene from his previous life slammed into his mind. The very moment he bit the dust, clutching the fading Ji Yao while Ren Xian just watched, not a single shred of pity in her eyes. Ren Xian, on the other hand, was a cocktail of baffled and furious, demanding to know what kind of nonsense he was spouting, frantically reminding him that she'd just times, given his little love. Confession, the green light, as she shoved her phone in his face, displaying the chat log where he'd practically begged her out, confessing his undying affection and all that jazz. She shrieked, her voice cracking with pure frustration. "You're the one who was desperate to date me." It made zero sense. Why was he suddenly trying to emotionally gut-punch her? But Su Ming? He just stood there, his face a mask of cold, unreadable stone, a slow, all-knowing smirk creeping across his lips. "Oh, you're right about the confession. All right, but that little drama? That was from a past life." His thoughts rewound the tape, flicking through the highlight reel of their so-called relationship. He saw her then, the untouchable queen bee of the school, and him, just some nobody orphan. He remembered it clear as day, the day after that first chaotic awakening ceremony. He was feeling lower than a snake's belly when she'd glided over, flashing that saintly smile and asking if he was okay. And just like that, he thought he'd finally won someone's affection, a delusion that snowballed into that cringe-worthy text confession, all those lovey-dovey dates, and the moments they got close. But that whole rosy picture was instantly torched by the memory of one specific photograph. Her and Jiang Tang, cozy as can be, the ultimate proof of her two-faced treachery. Snapping back to the present, Su Ming's face twisted into a mask of pure rage as he roared. It was all a freaking lie. The accusations just poured out of him, hot and furious, declaring, "I know everything. Your little backroom deals with Jiang Tong, how you were just playing me for a fool." Ren Xian looked like she'd been struck by lightning, sputtering that he was spewing absolute garbage and desperately trying to wave it all away. But Su Ming wasn't letting up, not for a second. He told her, "Oh, you know damn well if I'm lying or not. That whole perfect, pretty little act of yours, it's a complete sham." He got even closer, his voice dripping with pure, unadulterated venom, and whispered, "The real you is just a shallow, shameless piece of work." And with that, Ren Xian's carefully crafted composure utterly disintegrated, her face warping with raw fury as the mask finally fell. She screeched at him, "What could a pathetic orphan like you possibly know?" She spat the words like poison. "If it wasn't for that speck of talent you have, you wouldn't have even earned the right to breathe the same air as me." Then came the threat, bellowing that both she and Jiang Tang would make him regret ever crossing her. Su Ming just hit her with a smirk so smug it could curdle milk. He basically dared her, like, "Come at me, sis," but then twisted the knife, suggesting she'd better worry about how this little drama bomb would nuke her pure as the driven snow public image. And that little jab was the final straw that broke the crazy camel's back. She was absolutely radiating rage. She scrambled for the sword Su Ming had so conveniently left, plunged in the concrete, and swung it at his head. As the steel whistled towards him, Su Ming's only thought was, "Yep, just like the last timeline. So predictable." Except this time, he'd done his homework. Just as the sword was about to give him a free haircut, sinister tendrils of pure red energy erupted straight from the blade. They stopped the sword cold in midair, leaving Ren Xiaoman looking like her brain had just blue-screened. Su Ming just sighed. I totally saw that coming. I mean, he was well aware of her hobby of collecting friends' backs to stab. A system notification popped up, helpfully confirming the activation of his sword's Crimson Drinker ability. The red energy tentacles then whipped out from the blade and coiled around Ren Xiaomon. "It's a trap," Su Ming announced with a grin. The moment he'd tagged her with his weapon's skill, her fate was completely sealed. A tendril lashed out and gave her a high five, directly to the face. She let out a shriek that could shatter diamonds, wailing about how her moneymaker was totally ruined. As she crumpled to the ground in a pathetic heap, Su Ming stood over her and coldly informed her that she'd played a stupid game and won a stupid prize. He was just about to launch into his epic revenge monologue, but of course, she interrupted him. She started screeching that she was going to call her big boy Jiang Tong to come and delete him. Su Ming, completely unfazed, simply recalled his sword. The blade dematerialized with a cool times, swing times back into his inventory. Then he just turned and walked away. He casually tossed over his shoulder, "Go on then, run and tell Jiang Tang he can come find me whenever he's ready to play. Consider today's little love tap my official resignation," he declared, leaving her bawling her eyes out on the rooftop. He figured that this blade hadn't just cut her face, it had finally severed the dumb feelings he'd once treasured. A little while later, his phone pinged. It was a care package from the academy, with a note from Principal Wang himself. It was a congrats on your awakening gift, a little starter pack to make sure he didn't get flattened in the beginner dungeon. The loot box contained one fortification pill, a full combat gear package, and a tidy sum of 10,000 advent coins. The next day kicked off at 6 a.m. sharp, with Su Ming inspecting the fortification pill from the principal. He had to admit, for a school official, the guy was surprisingly generous. But he figured it was just a pity prize for awakening the supposedly lame swordmaster class, despite his god-tier 10-star talent. He popped the pill anyway, and immediately griped that it tasted like a goblin's armpit. The foul taste was instantly forgotten as a brilliant golden aura exploded around him, followed by a system notification that made his eyes pop. That nasty little pill had just juiced him with a +10 to Constitution and a sweet 100 experience points, which was enough to instantly ding him to level 2 and score him 10 free attribute points. As his status screen refreshed with the glorious new stats, a brand new passive talent flickered to life. Innate Sword Body. This OP talent meant he was basically born with a legendary sword forged inside his very heart, which let him learn any sword-type skill imaginable while completely ignoring all those pesky restrictions. Su Ming was beyond pleased, thinking that, of course, this was the kind of broken power befitting his 10-star talent. He was getting cheat skills just by leveling up. Brimming with a dangerous new level of confidence, he smirked and declared he was about to show everyone what true power looked like in the novice dungeon. He strolled up to the First Academy's novice dungeon area, a chaotic plaza buzzing with students and shimmering portals, where a pack of his classmates immediately swarmed him. And wouldn't you know it, it was the same clowns who had mocked his class, now desperately begging to team up. They were suddenly gushing about his magnificent 10-star talent and the principal's generous gift, chirping about how the dungeon would be a total cakewalk with him leading the charge. They shamelessly offered their classes to cover the swordmaster's weaknesses, clearly just hoping to ride his coattails to a free S rank. The sheer, unadulterated hypocrisy was enough to make Su Ming sick. He vividly remembered their sneering faces from the day before, so he shut them down with a cold, hard no. He lied straight to their faces, saying he already had a team, a fib that was immediately overheard by Ji Yao. She rushed over, her face a mask of confusion, asking when in the world he'd formed a team. She explained she'd gotten there early specifically so she could be the first to ask him. Su Ming, caught red-handed, was totally flustered. He fumbled for an excuse, telling her his dungeon goals weren't about the usual rewards, and played the "I'm worried you'll get hurt" card before leaning in to whisper his actual, insane intention. He was planning to solo the entire dungeon. Just as Ji Yao's brain was trying to process this bombshell, they were cut off by a blue-haired pretty boy with an incredibly punchable, smug grin. He introduced himself as Jans, like he was some kind of celebrity. He puffed out his chest, announced he was a 9-star demon hunter ranger, and formally invited Su Ming to his team. Su Ming recognized this chump, Yanzo, from his past life and, without a single hesitation, shot down his offer. Before Yanzai could even argue, Ji Yao stepped right in between them. She casually slung an arm around Su Ming's shoulders, basically telling the vultures he was already taken and they should buzz off. The wannabe teammates, Jans included, muttered some lame apologies and scurried away with their tails between their legs. With the coast clear, Su Ming gave Guy a look of pure appreciation, thinking to himself, "Dang, this girl is a keeper." While chilling with Guy Yao, Su Ming shot a quick look at the clock. He saw the dungeon's grand opening was just moments away, and right on cue, a massive blue portal warped into existence with a dramatic swirl. A booming voice then declared that the 127th Novice Dungeon Challenge had officially kicked off, and who should pop out of the portal but a holographic projection of Principal Wang himself. Looking like he'd just rolled out of bed, he mumbled an apology for oversleeping before laying down the rules for this mandatory one-day trial. Apparently, every single student was already pre-registered, so there was no backing out now. Inside, it was all about racking up points based on how much you contributed to the cause. He strongly suggested everyone team up, to boost their odds of not getting unalived and actually finishing this thing within the day. While the principal was still droning on, Guy turned to Su Ming, only to find he'd pulled a Houdini and completely vanished. She blinked, looking around totally bewildered. But before anyone else could even process what was happening, Principal Wang officially yelled, "Let the dungeon crawl begin." And in that exact instant, a blur shot past the entire student body and yeeted himself straight into the portal. The crowd absolutely lost it, screaming about some mad lad who'd already dived in, quickly realizing the solo runner was none other than the legendary 10-star student, Su Ming. The moment he phased into the dungeon, a wave of nostalgia washed over Su Ming. He remembered this song and dance from his first life. Back then, he had been a scared, excited little noob. Just then, a classic, booming system voice echoed through the air. It gave the standard "Welcome, novices" speech, explaining how the dungeon was a place of both grave danger and epic loot. To get out, all they had to do was beat the regular boss, the easy mode route. However, it also dropped a not-so-subtle hint about a high-difficulty path for much juicier rewards, and a smirk spread across Su Ming's face. Su Ming immediately set his new objective. In this life, there were no half measures. He was going straight for the Nightmare Mode challenge, to hunt down and absolutely demolish the dungeon's ultimate hidden boss. His surroundings materialized into a lush, moonlit jungle, which the system helpfully identified as the Raging Tide Forest, a puny level F zone. He instantly clocked that the map for this starter dungeon got a refresh every year. This meant the layout was completely different from the one he'd speed ran in his past life. He also knew the spawn points were randomized for every player, a classic bit of dungeon RNG to keep things fresh. That meant he'd have to map out his route on the fly, and the mobs he'd be farming would be a different flavor this time. All this just added a little extra spice to the challenge, not that it would slow him down. As he began his speed run of the dungeon, he almost immediately bumped into a high-level mob, a A colossal, sentient tree with a head of blazing fire and a face carved to look extremely unchill. Thanks to his past life cheat sheet, he knew this overgrown fire hazard was stationary, but it would use its vines to yoink players into its fiery mouth. However, grinding trash mobs wasn't on his agenda. He was laser-focused on the real prize, the hidden boss. Therefore, he figured it was best to just ghost this oversized matchstick. He pulled up a holographic map, charting the most efficient path. He chuckled, knowing that rushing in solo was the ultimate pro-gamer move to get a head start. He needed to scout the new layout and snag all the key items required to summon the secret boss. And while the developers changed the map's layout every single year, he knew the fundamental cheat code to trigger the boss fight would be exactly the same. He had to move fast before more clueless students showed up and started looting the items he needed. With his strategy locked and loaded, he shot forward, blazing a trail through the dense forest. A short while later, at 7:30 in the morning, another party of students finally zoned into the dungeon. A girl with light blue hair and her two male party members cautiously scanned the quiet clearing. They noticed there were no other players around and foolishly concluded that the coast was clear. Their blissful ignorance was shattered when the girl heard a suspicious noise from the trees, yelling for her team to watch out. They glanced up just in time to witness another student come crashing through the canopy. The kid, desperately clutching a hammer, face planted near them while screaming for backup. The newly arrived team could only gawk in stunned silence as the reason for his panicked retreat was revealed. Two gigantic, monstrous rats with eyes glowing an ominous red. The second they recognized the infamous bloodthirsty rats, their courage stat plummeted to 0, and in a complete panic, they decided to split the party and flee for their lives. Back at the plaza, the trial's brutal difficulty was becoming crystal clear. At 7:31 a.m., a kill feed notification flashed above the portal, announcing that 3 challengers had just been turned into rat chow by the bloodthirsty rats. The highest level player to get wiped was the 6-star student, Li Dabao. Ji Yao, who was still trying to find a group, was completely floored. Horrified that a 6-star player got eliminated so quickly, she frantically urged everyone to get their teams together faster, shouting that the people already inside were getting steamrolled and desperately needed reinforcements. Meanwhile, inside the raging tide forest, the situation was an absolute disaster. The blue-haired girl from the ambushed party was now running for her dear life. Alone, banged up, and in the middle of a full-blown panic attack, she'd been ghosted by her teammates and had absolutely no clue where she was. As she tried to do some amateur navigation, she got that classic "you're being watched" tingle down her spine. Her head snapped up, and she saw the silhouette of a ridiculously huge ape monster just chilling in the trees. The creature then made its grand entrance, slamming down to the ground, its glowing red eyes staring her down with pure, unadulterated malice. Frozen stiff by a healthy dose of fear, the girl could only be a spectator to her own demise as the giant beast lunged forward. In what she assumed were her final seconds, she slammed her eyes shut and belted out the most classic, ear-splitting shriek for a hero to save her. And right on cue, a crimson blur zipped past her. In a display of speed that was frankly just showing off, Su Ming decided to make his appearance.